Hello, and thank you to everyone who's given feedback about the last video. I just want to do another one, and this is quite a big topic, so I'm just going to do my best to open it up. The topic is what is depression, but I first of all just want you to think about what makes you sad. So there are loads of sad things, and some people process those sad things better than others, shall we say. What might have come to your mind was maybe a loss, maybe something you can't get back, maybe a regret for time that's passed, maybe a grief for someone who has died, or maybe a situation you're in. A relationship splits, perhaps there's a conflict, perhaps you don't get the job that you think you deserve, or I don't know, maybe someone steals something, or there's something horrible. So I just want to ask another question. What makes you angry? So some people believe that depression is anger that is channeled inwards, and that's very problematic, especially if that anger perhaps sometimes is channeled outwards and can become violence, or maybe it's channeled towards an addiction, which might make it harder to uncover what the problem is. What I just want you to think about for a moment now is who you are. Okay, thank you for doing that. So my belief currently, I think, is that depression is a negative comparison to your own self-image. So my belief is that whatever you think you are, or you feel that you should be, if maybe circumstances or the situation doesn't sort of relate to that, then there's a state of depression. So rather than being completely dependent on external factors, it's more about what you feel. It's more about what's inside. So if you believe that you should be, for example, married with 2 children, with a nice job and a house in a nice place, then if something is slightly out of line with that, that might make you depressed. This is why people that you perhaps think shouldn't be depressed are depressed, because if you're famous, for example, and you have a really big concert, then perhaps the next concert isn't quite as big, or perhaps you don't get the same radio play or the same success on your second album, for example, then that comparison will make you depressed, which is something that a lot of people perhaps don't really relate to when they're asking what's wrong. One struggle that I've had is when people have perhaps asked, what's wrong, or how are you? Because my perception is people like quite concise answers. So if someone was to say to someone that's depressed, what's wrong? And they said, for example, my cat died last week. And then they can kind of relate to that, and they're like, oh, well, okay, you're sad because your cat died last week, and I understand that, so now I accept you. Someone with depression is likely to be suffering in a more complicated way. So it might be, for example, they're sad because their mother died, but perhaps that's 3 or 4 years ago, and something's maybe reminded them of it. So that's quite hard to communicate or even understand. So it's better, perhaps from my perception, to just go straight to the acceptance of the person. So if you know someone is depressed, you can probably safely assume that they're not that happy or well. You don't need to ask them. You can just try your best to just accept them. So how do we support someone who's depressed? Because so much of depression is about the internal dialogue, I believe the best way to support someone else that's depressed is just to try as best you can to be accepting, to try and make someone feel calm just by accepting where they are. It tends to be that when someone is depressed, what's wrong isn't an easy thing to explain. It's not a matter of such and such did such and such and I'm sad. It's more a case of such and such did such and such and it triggered a pattern which was very deep, and I'm trying to work through that pattern. If you can, try and be a little bit more patient perhaps with people who are depressed. They might be a little bit more irritable or snappy, but try and believe that their true self is not what's causing that behaviour. They are not their illness. And if you possibly can, try and separate those two out. As someone becomes more well, you might see fluctuations. So you might see them on one day where they're very depressed, perhaps withdrawn or irritable, and perhaps on another day you might see them a little bit calmer and a little bit more friendly or happy, fun. So that's good if you can do that, because once the person starts breaking through their illness, then you can remember who they are. If you think you're depressed yourself, or if you know that you're depressed yourself, do look at the 5 ways to well-being and do think about trying to spend some time finding your true voice. So try to find out who you are a little bit clearer, and maybe the element of acceptance of whatever situation you're in is a route to more substantial stability. So our world isn't very helpful for people who are suffering for depression. A lot of our systems and advertising and social media actually almost play on the fact that people are depressed or insecure. So things like social media, maybe Facebook or Instagram, encourage a comparison, and perhaps when someone's depressed and they're looking at a photo of their friend, perhaps on a holiday with their partner, rather than thinking, oh, I'm really happy for my friend having this really lovely time, the thought may well be more about, well, why have I not got that really happy experience? Depression is very difficult to see for people who care about the person who is suffering. And it can be very difficult to support them because it is their internal belief and their internal voice that is the negative thing. So it's not always about changing external factors that won't necessarily fix the depression, if you like. The best way, I think, to support someone with depression is to try your very best to accept them as they are. Try and build trust by being reliable. Try and include them if you possibly can in different sort of settings. Try and not abandon them by maintaining a contact, even if that's just maybe a text message, maybe every couple of months, or it could be more than that. If you support someone who is very unwell, perhaps their internal dialogue is so negative about themselves that if you try and do something nice, they may well react with hostility. They may push you away, and they may be snappy, or they may not accept it. And that's quite common, and it might not make sense, but I guess it kind of does once you've suffered. This belief that you don't deserve niceness, you're so unlovable and so horrible that if someone's nice to you, they probably don't understand or they don't know you, so you kind of push them away. It doesn't really help, but I would say sort of when you're supporting someone who does that sort of behaviour, try and be sort of more steady with them. Don't try and kind of give an elaborate gift or a big kind of gesture of friendship. Maybe do a small gesture, a little levelling, and that's more likely to be what they need. Sometimes that's fairly easy to do, and just sitting calmly or watching a film together or doing something sort of fairly low key is achievable, but it does depend how depressed or how unwell someone is, and to get someone to come out of their shell can be a very difficult thing, so keep at it. It's very difficult for others to be alongside people who are depressed, and especially relatives and close friends of people who are suffering from depression, and especially if it becomes long term, it's really tough for them. So, well done to all of you supporters of people who are depressed, and thank you on behalf of everyone who's depressed. Thank you for watching the video. Depression is a massive topic, and this is just opening the door for hopefully some discussion and thoughts, but thank you for watching.